It is the resistance report for February 1st, 2017. Good evening. Heading tonight's discussion. This isn't news, it's really a discussion. I want to put in context the day's events, but put them in context and show you how one thing is connected to another. And one of the themes tonight is going to be this little, it's not in a booklet form. It's called the Constitution of the United States. And I urge you, if you don't have one, get one. Every family should have one. Everybody should have one, because this is going to become more and more relevant as the tyranny of Donald Trump and the Trump-Bannon administration, let's call it that, become more and more obvious. And there's more lawsuits, and there are more attempts to push back. So we'll get to this just a little second. I want to say that the Gorsuch nomination that was made by Trump yesterday obviously is I don't think he's qualified to be a Supreme Court justice, but that should not be the issue. And what I want to urge you, and to the extent that you can urge members of Congress, Democrats and others to do this, don't make Gorsuch and his ideology and qualifications the focus of your activities over the next months. The real focus ought to be Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is not yet clearly a legitimate president. That is the big issue. We don't know yet what the investigation by the Senate Intelligence Committee and the FBI, assuming the FBI will be permitted to continue their investigation, will turn up in terms of the connection between Russian operatives and Donald Trump in fixing the election. I don't know how many of you remember, but Dianne Feinstein, just about a month and maybe 5 weeks ago, was on one of the Sunday talk shows. She is the head, she's the highest Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, and she was asked point blank, did Russian operatives affect the outcome of the 2016 election? Not did they affect the 2016 election, but did they affect the outcome of the 2016 election? And Dianne Feinstein, the ranking minority member of the Intelligence Committee, who has seen all of the evidence to date, she said, yes. Now, the press didn't pick up on that very much, but I think that is a big, big issue, and we can't have a legitimate Supreme Court justice until we have a legitimate president. And so there should be no vote on Donald Trump's nominees, any of them, even if there's somebody after Gorsuch. There should be no vote until we are clear about the legitimacy of the Donald Trump presidency. We also need to see his taxes, and we also need him to put his assets into a blind trust. Those are the three prerequisites of holding any vote on any nominee to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is too important. I mean, those Supreme Court justices are interpreting the Constitution of the United States. They're interpreting statutes. They are there for years. I mean, Gorsuch himself is 49 years old. He could be there for the next 30, 40, 50 years. Supreme Court justices live a long time. They live longer than most people. I don't know why that is, but they do. And so this is such an important choice and such an important decision. You don't want an illegitimate president to be making it. And so what Democrats ought to be doing, and any responsible Republicans, is to say no vote until we are sure that Donald Trump is responsible and legitimate, and that legitimacy depends upon the outcome of the investigation with regard to any contacts or any fixing of the election. And number two, it depends on knowing much more about him than we know about his financial transactions that might have played a part in Russia's decision, such as his taxes and also his assets. You see how it all fits together. And that's why it is very important that Democrats, when Republicans say, no, that's unfair, you can't do that, you can't possibly hold up Gorsuch or any Supreme Court nomination, Democrats have to come back and say, wait a minute, there is somebody named Merrick Garland. You remember Merrick Garland? He is the person that Barack Obama put up And the Republicans, headed by Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell, said, well, we are not going to even consider Merrick Garland until we have a quote-unquote legitimate president. That is, Mitch McConnell said, Barack Obama is not going to be here long enough. He's just going to be here another 10 months. He's at the end of his term, so we ought to wait until we have a new legitimate president. Well, I'm sorry. If Merrick Garland is not going to be even considered at all, then it seems completely necessary and appropriate not to consider any Trump nominee until we know that Donald Trump is the legitimate president. And by even beginning to talk about Neil Gorsuch and his qualifications and whether he's good or bad, you see how you're normalizing the Trump presidency, making this nomination as if it's like any other nomination from a Republican president. Don't do that. We must not fall into the trap of normalizing the Trump presidency by treating the Gorsuch or any Supreme Court nomination like that. It is not a matter simply of their qualifications or their ideology. It's a matter of Trump's legitimacy. Keep the focus on Trump, which really is part of a larger theme tonight, going back to the Constitution, and that is that we need to keep our eyes fixed on the big questions of Donald Trump. And it's not just, I've already mentioned his conflicts of interest, Article 1, Section 9, the Emoluments Clause. A big deal. Think about also the unconstitutional ban on Muslims. And it's a ban on Muslims. Rudy Giuliani was very clear about that. The First Amendment is supposed to keep a wall between church and state. No established religion in the United States. And then also the Russian oligarchs affecting the outcome, as I just said, Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution. And then also the attack on the free press, which the Trump administration is making daily, demeaning the free press and substituting what? Tweets and their own Breitbart news. First Amendment. And also foreign policy which is supposed to be executed in a way that is consistent with American values and not treasonous. In fact, this document spells out treason. And when Donald Trump puts Steve Bannon, who used to run Breitbart News, the proto-nationalist, white supremacist organization, on the Principals Committee of the National Security Council and demotes at the same time the head of intelligence and also the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Well, that also gets us into this issue of what is behavior that is defined as treason. Keep your eyes on the big questions. Yeah, Trump is a master at deflecting, at getting our attention on what? On his daily tweets. Focus on what's most important. I also, today, I want to provide kudos. If we're talking about the Constitution, the responsibility of Republicans as well as Democrats to stand up in favor of people who are qualified and against people who are not qualified to hold high federal offices in the cabinet, I want to do a shout out to two Republican senators who had the guts today, the courage today to speak out against the worst of the worst. I mean, Betsy DeVos, by the way, for Education Secretary, she knows nothing about education. She's never been in a public school. She doesn't have a public school education. She has no expertise at all. All she has is a lot of money. And she has sort of this idea, this fixated idea that you want taxpayer money to go into private schools, including religious schools. By the way, hello, First Amendment. No established religion, Betsy DeVos. Well, we've got two Republican members of the Senate who today said no, they're not going to vote for Betsy DeVos. And so a shout out to Susan Collins of Maine, Republican, and also to Republican Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. You might call their offices and say how much you appreciate what they did today, putting the United States ahead of their party. I wish more Republicans would do that. Finally, let me just say that we are seeing a major pushback, and it is occurring all over America in the resistance, and it is affecting members of Congress, it's affecting the media, it's affecting the courts. We're seeing more and more in the courts. It's even a pushback among federal civil servants. More and more federal civil servants are actually finding ways of guarding information and the truth, and also expressing their distress about encroachments on, which is just to say, we are having an effect. Now, many of you, I know you're petrified, you're scared, you're anxious. I understand those feelings. I am scared and anxious as well. But the good news is that in our system, we have a certain resilience, particularly when it comes to basic constitutional issues. And that resilience means that all of us, the courts system, Democrats and Republicans in Congress, to the extent that they do have the courage, also the media and the federal civil servants and everyone else involved, really has a major role to play. Now, some of you wrote in questions, and I asked you tonight to write in questions because just as an experiment, I thought I'd take some of your questions. I haven't seen them beforehand, so please, the first question comes from Carlene Brown Betchen. Carlene, you say, I'm organizing with other resistors. Making lots of calls, emailing and posting and protesting. Nothing feels like it's having an impact. What should be the priority? Carlene, right now, the priority ought to be getting to your members of Congress with regard to both making sure they are not going to even proceed with a vote on anything resembling a Supreme Court nominee until Trump is legitimate, and also letting your feelings be known about all of these Trump nominees for the cabinet. Now, I know it's hard to get through to the members of Congress, and a lot of the lines are jammed, which is good. Keep up. Don't stop calling. That's very, very important. The other thing I would urge, you get together with other people in a group, a resistance group. Some people are calling them indivisible groups, and you actually plan some strategy. You plan about getting the facts and how you're going to organize for the midterm elections, and how you're going to get together with sister districts in purple states and purple districts, and how you're going to make your state and your legislature in your state better. A lot of things to be done, but don't forget to organize and mobilize. Next question. That was a long answer to a simple question. All right, this is our friend Jobin Gill. How do executive orders actually work? Are they the same thing as law? Gentlemen, executive orders do have the full force of law. They are supposed to be confined to questions of actually how a law or a regulation is effectively enforced. They are not supposed to be legislation in and of themselves. In fact, the Constitution, makes it very clear that the legislative function belongs with Congress. What the executive is supposed to do is execute the laws. So executive orders are helpful, supposedly, to the executive in determining how the laws are going to be executed. If those executive orders start replacing real laws that the Constitution gives to Congress, then we've got a constitutional crisis. And it looks to me as if Donald Trump is coming very, very close to that line. Next question. This is from Betsy Scharf Nelson. How can we encourage moderate Republicans to vote their conscience and not by party line only? We do see today, Betsy, with Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, we have some moderate Republicans. Some would say they're conservative Republicans, but they are voting their conscience. The way to encourage more to do that is to encourage them. Particularly if you are in Maine or you are in Alaska, make sure you call and you write and you commend them. It takes a huge amount of courage. Believe me, I have been there. I know that. To stand up against your party and to say you're voting in a way that your party and the head of your entire caucus in the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, doesn't want, takes real backbone. That's why we all have to support that kind of backbone, whether it's Democrats or Republicans. And then finally, Dennis Frank, do you support the nuclear? Oh, we have a couple more. Dennis Frank asks, do you support the nuclear option? Dennis, the nuclear option is, for those of you who don't know, a rules change. Republicans could, by a majority vote, change the rules of the Senate, and they could decide that instead of a 60 votes necessary to overcome a filibuster for a Supreme Court nomination, they could just choose 51 votes. Do I support a nuclear option? I do not support a nuclear option, and I've been on record as not supporting that for the Supreme Court. I've supported it for lower court appointments. I think the Supreme Court, for all the reasons I've talked about and all the reasons here, is really special and important, and having a kind of supermajority is appropriate for a Supreme Court. But what happens, you might ask yourself, if the Republicans go ahead and use the nuclear option with regard to Trump's pick? Well, then I think Democrats have no choice. They've got to use all the procedural hurdles at their disposal, including continuing to raise points of order and to reject any kind of a moving forward of any of the agenda. And there are ways of doing that. You know who was a master at doing that? And I saw him do it, Ted Kennedy, when he was senator. He, even though he was in the minority through most of the 1990s, he understood the procedural rules. He could hold that entire Senate up in a web, a tangle of motions. They couldn't move forward. That's what the Democrats need to do. Loretta Moreau, is that the way I pronounce it, Loretta? What's happening with the checks and balances that we have been hearing about for years and years? Well, Loretta, the test is happening right now. We are undergoing right now a true test of our system of government. Donald Trump has precipitated, I won't say yet, a constitutional crisis. There may still be a constitutional crisis, but in many ways, this is a test of the capacity of our separation of powers, our checks and balances, to do what the framers of the Constitution intended, and not allow any single person, any single man or woman, in this case a man, Donald Trump, to take tyrannical power. That's what this is all about. That's what the framers had in mind. That's what the Constitution is all about. Preventing tyrants from taking power from the people. And that's what we have to guard against. And that's what we are guarding against. I want to end tonight with what I am actually looking at most. This is the 25th Amendment to the Constitution. I'm going to read from Section 4. Are you ready for a little reading? A little reading tonight, Section 4 of the 25th Amendment. And I'm quoting now. Whenever the Vice President and a majority of either the principal officers of the executive departments or of such other body as Congress may by law provide, whenever they transmit to the President pro tempore of the Senate, that means essentially the Vice President, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives, their written declaration that the President is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, the Vice President shall immediately assume the powers and duties of the office as acting President. And Congress, if it comes back again, shall decide the issue by 2/3 vote of both houses. And if 2/3 vote of both houses feel that the President is incompetent, that is the end of that presidency. I just want you to keep that in mind, because it's not only impeachment that we have going for us, possibly, it is also the 25th Amendment. So all of you, run out, get the Constitution, and I will talk with you tomorrow.